who has ministerial responsibility for the Citizenship by Investment Program, the CIP, tabled the long overdue annual report of the Citizenship by Investment Unit, covering the period April 1st, 2022 to March 30th, 2023. It was one of two reports that failed to be presented to the Parliament. The 2023-2024 report remains outstanding. Here's what the Minister, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, had to say about this.
This report is 1 year late, for which I sincerely apologize. We should always endeavor at all times to meet our statutory obligations. I do not desire to see this as a routine practice, and I believe that unlike what has become a norm with so many statutory bodies, we should always endeavor to meet our statutory obligations. I have been informed that the delay was due to a number of factors, some of which were beyond the control of the unit. But it is not a time to give reasons or excuses. Better must be done by the unit. I am also informed that every effort is being made by the auditors so that the unit can present to me the annual report for 2023-2024, which is statutorily due to be laid in this House on 31st October 2024. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are now at this point only late with one report which has been laid today. I will endeavor, Mr. Speaker, to have this report submitted to Parliament as soon as possible after I have received it.
And that's Deputy Prime Minister there, Dr. Ernest Hilaire. Now, here to discuss the final details of the annual report and the appending issues is a chartered accountant with a wealth of experience in a number of areas, including the retail industry, credit unions, telecommunications, banking, insurance, and auditing. He assumed a number of key leadership positions during his career, and during his period in public accounting, trained a number of accountants, many of whom now occupy senior positions locally and internationally. He is a former president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Eastern Caribbean, former chairman of the Public and Teaching Service Commission, Serin St. Lucia. He is the principal in his consulting firm, which offers a range of services, including tax advisory and compliance, receiverships, liquidations, business planning, forensic audits, accounting, general consulting, directorships, and company secretarial. Let's say hello and welcome to Mr. Frank Myers. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us and to get a review of the much anticipated annual report from the Citizenship by Investment Unit, the CIU.
Yes, Mr. Thanks for having me. So this morning. In respect of the financial statements of the CIP, I think it's a shame that we have had to go for so long without having these financial statements published in accordance with the requirements of the Act, which requires that these things be tabled in the House, I think, up to at most 6 months after the end of the financial year. Now, most persons will think it's no big deal for the statements to be that late, but you have to understand these financial statements bear a particular purpose. For one, it gives credence, if you will, to the accounting and record keeping of the entity that the report is on, and secondly, it adheres to a statutory requirement. That in itself sends out a signal to other investors and persons who may have an interest in the country, the seriousness with which this thing is taken. To understand the importance of that, we'll think of the presentation of financial statements in the context of a public company. Normally, it varies on jurisdiction, but there are 60 to 90 days within which these financial statements should be prepared. And inevitably, these things have an impact on the share price of publicly quoted companies. And invariably, if you have a company that does not report on time, then it always ends up in the share price being affected, because that is interpreted by the market as something wrong within the company. Here we are over a year late, and that's way too much. And any independent party looking at that would be concerned as to why exactly it's so late. The minister pointed out this is not a time for excuses, but it should never come to that, in my opinion. It really shouldn't, and we really have to hope that going forward we get a lot more timely reporting. What has to happen is there is a responsibility to properly staff the entity, so that not only do you get these statements out on time, but it also means that all the internal controls, etc., within the entity, one can get a sense that all of these are working properly, so that come the year end, there's no real significant delay in getting these statements out.
Oh, well, you speak there about the staffing, and the minister did say, and we'll get to that a little later on, that there was an increase in staff, and for particularly that reason, in that section there of accounting and due diligence, etc. We'll get to the figures a little later on. So hopefully the next report is going to come as quickly as possible. But it is important to note that the 2023-2024 report would contain, or perhaps the public would want it to contain, details about a lot of the issues that have been discussed currently regarding the real estate option under the enterprise in the CIP, so many other issues pertaining to how the infrastructure option is working. So that 2023-2024 report would be very, very critical for the public to receive, so that we can have some clarity on what some of the surrounding issues are. So given that, Frank, when you went over this report, the 2022-2023 report, through an auditor's eye, what are your thoughts coming out of that?
I have a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but I have a few concerns about various aspects of the financial statements, not the audit report, the financial statements themselves. But I don't think that here is the appropriate forum to get into that level of detail. But one of the key things I noted is that the financial statements report as income of the entity only administrative fees or some such thing, and I don't think that the public would be happy with that, simply because of we've heard so many large numbers floating around recently involving the collection of monies for the sale of passports. I don't like using that phrase. So it was a bit disconcerting to me to see the revenue being reported for that period was only, I think, about $60 million. We were certainly expecting, at least I was expecting, our revenue to be a lot more than that, and perhaps that is something I can follow up later with appropriate persons. I reviewed the legislation to try to understand why it appears that the actual operation of the unit and the board are being separated. But what this situation means is that the audit report, which was given by the auditors, does not cover the report of the board itself. There is no relationship between the two. So in fact, the public is not getting the comfort of the assurity of the assurance that the audit report issued by the auditors is supposed to give.
And so what sort of assurance would you be looking for then?
Well, basically, when an auditor gives an opinion on a set of financial statement, to the extent that the auditor's report does not contain what we call a qualification or reservation, it's a compliment in a sense to the persons who kept the records, that you have done everything correctly, your internal controls were working, and all such things were done in a timely manner. And it's something I think that most financial controllers try to attain. That sort of, if you will, the tick beside the work that you have done for the years gone by, for the year gone by. But in this case, there isn't that. And I think that is one of the reasons you have to try and get these things out in a timely manner. One must understand, you must separate the reporting from the actual maintenance of the accounting records, because the proper maintenance of the accounts will basically assist the management in running the entity efficiently. If we don't have that, and we have to wait until the end of the year when the auditors report, it's not such a good thing for the entity.
Well, it would seem that notwithstanding, the CIU had a very fantastic year. It's an increase of 85% in applications received. They up from 583 to 1,076. There's a 25% increase in applications granted from 435 to 544. Total assets, a 94% increase in total assets, and a growth in shareholder equity, 44% at 37.7 million. And so the minister there, in his statement in Parliament, said that the unit is in a strong cash position and with an impressive balance sheet. Did you got that sense when you went through the financial statement?
What he said, that I don't know whether the numbers he was quoting there is really what, because you have to understand why is the unit operational, and I get the sense that it is there purely for us to get as much as we can from it in terms of numbers of entrants and the quantum of the funds that we're going to get from it. We don't know what was budgeted for the year. Going through the legislation, one sees that prior to the commencement of the year, there should be a budget presented that will show the intended operation of the units for the upcoming year. And so we don't know how it measured against the budget. So to that extent, I don't think one should be sort of happy to the extent to say we had a very good year. The other thing is, when we speak about the unit being in a good financial position, whilst it should have enough liquidity so that it can run normally on a day-to-day basis, I don't think that a strong balance sheet, in the sense that a strong balance sheet for a commercial entity, is something that we should be stressing. It should be government's role in the end, if at any one point in time that the entity finds itself in a weak financial position, to support it so that it can realize its ultimate goal. But that cannot be, I believe, one of the factors that one should report and say that things went well, because we have a strong balance sheet. Because technically, the strong balance sheet would come hopefully from cash being held within the entity, and in truth and in fact, any excess cash should be handed over to government. So it's, from my perspective, it's not a statistic I would take too much seriously. I would be more concerned about the operational efficiency of the unit, and that already has been, in a sense, reported on by the lateness of these financial statements.
So let's get into some of the meat of the matter now. So much had been said, and of course, stemming from the discussion surrounding this RICO case that is hanging over St. Lucia and St. Kitts and Nevis CIP programs. The escrow account. Before we can get into the nitty-gritty of that, give us a definition of what is an escrow account.
The escrow account is merely a vehicle to ensure that two parties who have an interest in a particular event properly satisfied before the event is executed. One of the simplest ways to look at it is in the context of purchasing land, for example. The escrow account in that case would come into play because both parties would be relying on, for example, the purchaser indicating to the seller that they do have the funds which they are going to pass into the holder of the escrow account, going to pass it to them. And then when certain things happen and both parties are satisfied that agreed events do take place, then the monies can be exchanged. So in a sense, it's a security for both the seller and the buyer. And the escrow account in this particular case, I think, would serve the same purpose. Now, I've heard a lot about the escrow account, and that is a personal opinion, I am yet to understand the reason for the escrow account.
But hold on to that thought, and let's see if we can get you some clarification from the minister, because he spoke extensively about the escrow account and the agreement. So let's listen to him on that.
When Galaxy became an approved developer in St. Lucia in 2019, under the former administration, they agreed to construct the Canals project. An escrow agent was approved by the board on 21st August 2019, pursuant to approved guidelines for the establishment and maintenance of an irrevocable escrow account, which includes, among other things, the obligation to hold the proceeds of the said escrow account in trust for Galaxy. In trust for Galaxy. August 2019. In trust for Galaxy and the investor, that is the applicant for citizenship, pursuant to an escrow agreement approved by the board. The guidelines also provided for the escrow account to remit monthly bank statements of the revenue and expenditure of the escrow account to the unit. The escrow account does not hold the money in trust for the government of St. Lucia. It is not our money. It is Galaxy's money from the sale of shares in their development. The money is to be used for the construction of the resort and the developer's expenses. The guidelines expressly state that the escrow agent must hold the money for and on behalf of the developer and the investor, and shall release, transfer, or otherwise deal with the escrow funds solely as directed in accordance with the terms of the escrow agreement. When Galaxy became...
And so you heard the minister there explaining the escrow account agreement. But he stresses that the government is not a party to that escrow agreement, that the agreement is really between the developer, the applicant, who is the investor, and the escrow agent. So do you accept that? So where does the government come in? And so we know that the government through the CIU now, because then, or the board, because it makes provision, the regulations make provision that at every stage, that when that monthly statement or whenever it is required comes in to the board, and the developer would require funds, then you release it, much as any contractor on a project with building a house with a bank, then you release the funds accordingly to the different phases and things of that sort. So how does the government not factor into this as part of the agreement, to your mind?
I'm a bit confused on the whole arrangement there, actually, because the way I see it is that we have the governor of St. Lucia, who is responsible for setting up this whole thing from the outset. And the way I understood it initially is that Galaxy was supposed to have come up with, I think, about $100 million to be used in the construction of the hotel, and the rest of the monies, which would come up to, in total with $100 million, would come up to the cost of the hotel, would be invested by the persons who wish to get the citizenships. So if, for example, the cost of the hotel, and at the time when it was initially set up, I got a sense it was about $300 million, $350 million. So we would have $100 million coming from Galaxy, which they were supposed to commence the project with, and the other monies from the investors would be coming over a period of time. Now, and that account, that escrow account, would be controlled by somebody else who would be sitting on top of it, if you will, an independent party. And to the extent that that independent party is satisfied that monies are coming out for valid purposes in accordance with the escrow account, would then release the money as required. I don't understand why it is being said that the funds are not the government of St. Lucia's funds, because in the end, it's the government of St. Lucia who is driving that whole thing. So that part I actually don't understand. What is even more surprising to me is that initially when this thing started off, we were speaking about a hotel costing in the region of $300 million, $320 million. And I'm understanding now, US dollars. And I'm understanding now that it has gone up, but we don't know to what extent it has gone up. And
well, actually, the Prime Minister in his budget address did say that the project, because though you have the hotel and the residences, this combined project, which is what they're doing at Canal, would now it's at 1.2 billion EC dollars. So he did say that in the budget address.
1.2 billion EC dollars. So that would be about what, 400 million.
Yes, about
420
million US dollars. US dollars, yes. The back and forth between the currencies can get a little sticky.
Yes, about 420 million US dollars. But the thing is, we've been hearing conversation here in that more passports have been authorized for issue than what was initially agreed. And if all of those passports were supposed to be taken up, then the amounts being collected would be far in excess of what is required to build a hotel. Now, in a case like this, it cannot be that all the money going into this account, this escrow account in inverted commas, can belong to the developer, because the money is being raised at the instance of the government of St. Lucia.
So I just want to just hold on a moment there, Frank. I just want to slightly correct myself, because I wanted to make sure the figure is correct. So I went back to that page there for the budget address, and so it says here that at Canals Micoud, construction of 2 luxury all-inclusive hotels has started and is ongoing. It is proposed that the development will provide 250 rooms and 380 residences. Total investment 1 billion EC. I said 1.2, but it's actually 1 billion EC dollars.
So 1 billion EC dollars, and that'll be what? 370 million US. And that's not so far removed from the 300.
From what the original 300 was.
From the original cost. But the thing is, it seems that there were arrangements being made so that more than the initial allocation of passports would be sold. And the initial price hasn't increased by that much.
Well,
it's only about 20%.
But given that there was a revision, and the minister did say so, that there was a revision of the scope of works, and so then one would imagine that if you are revising what you had initially, then some movement would have to be made. But we were not given what those details are pertaining to that revision, but we simply know that he did revise that. So let's hear from the minister, where we'll get to what he says pertaining to the revision of the project. But I want us to listen carefully to him, because he mentioned, just in the clip we showed there before, he spoke about the monthly statements, and that's important because there's so much being said about monies that is out there, and given the vast number of passports or citizenships that are said to be floating, whether it be 13,000, 14,000. That Galaxy somehow has collected monies for all of those things. But the minister is saying, no, that is not the case. And he's saying that they do receive those statements. And by the way, that the agent, the escrow agent, has not changed. The escrow agent remains that same independent individual that you made reference to, the independent individual, as when the United Workers' Party administration was there. So let's listen to the minister explain to us about the monthly statements.
It is important to note that the unit reviews and reconciles these statements and confirms that the minimum investment amount was in fact paid into the escrow account and the particulars of the transfer is stated. Due diligence fees and government fees are paid by the applicant to the bank account of the unit held at a bank in St. Lucia. The bank in St. Lucia charges fees to undertake its own due diligence in relation to these incoming funds. And these funds are only cleared when the due diligence of the bank is satisfactorily complete.
The minister there. But before you chime in on that, Frank, Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre also had his say on the escrow account. And the minister spoke at a cabinet briefing just 1 week before that October 22nd sitting. So let's hear what Prime Minister Pierre had to say about the escrow account.
But with the allegations that Caribbean Galaxy would perhaps have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that should rightfully be in St. Lucia, have you looked into this?
I have not. I understand about the escrow account, and I've been informed that the escrow account has been reconciled, or has been reconciled, or is being reconciled, or was reconciled. So I can only go with the information that I have.
And that information was given to you as of when?
The reconciliation, first of all, you should ask first one question. The escrow account was supposed to be in St. Lucia. You must ask why and who approved it for it not to be in St. Lucia. First question.
But you also did say that the banks did not want to touch the CIP escrow account.
I didn't say so. I said, no. I said, you don't get me right. And you must tip me. I said, it's very, I did something, Lisa, I want to tell you something that's I said that anyone who goes to escrow account must be properly, the due diligence must be clear. And some banks have concerns about the due diligence as far as escrow accounts are concerned. I said so. But I didn't say the bank did not.
And you didn't tell me as of when your information about the reconciliation?
I've been, again, you see, Lisa,
that's your final question.
Lisa, you want to ask me these questions, and I know you don't intend it to be trick questions. No, I know. You want me to give you dates, but the Prime Minister said on the 8th of July. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
An approximate?
What I'm going to tell you is that when I asked, I was told that the escrow accounts reconciled.
And so that's the Prime Minister and the Minister for Finance, Philip J. Pierre, there on the escrow account. Your thoughts?
I am still baffled at the conversation surrounding this escrow account. And I'm sticking to my thought processes is that the whole transaction was initiated by the government of St. Lucia. Monies are being collected in wherever by virtue of actions undertaken by the government of St. Lucia. Now, initially, we were looking at $3 million approximately for the hotel, and it later climbed to, as we indicated a while ago, $370 million, all US dollars. Initially, $100 million would have been put in by the developer. That his money, that is Galaxy. The other $200 million were to come from those persons who were interested in getting citizenships. Later on, when this thing increased to $370 million, if there was no arrangements made to increase the pool of funds, then obviously the hotel would not be completed. Therefore, the $70 million difference between the 370 and the 300 either has to come from getting more investors than you initially said, or the investor, the developer himself, would have put in the difference. My understanding is that more investors were catered for because ultimately there was the capacity to collect $1.something billion in investors' fees, if you will. Now, the question one has to ask is, if we are now moving from $370 million required for the hotel, and you are collecting $1.something billion, if that is so, why should the difference between these go to the person who is building the hotel? Because the hotel costs 370, it goes up, it costs 500. There is still a significant amount that has been collected in a transaction initiated by the government of St. Lucia. Why should the developer have that? It does not make sense to me. I mean,
so
we're missing something.
Can you not consider that as being a profit? Because we know in every commercial venture there ought to be a profit. So do you think that that is considered as a profit for Galaxy? Because the minister did say they have to turn over a profit.
Of course they have to get a profit. A profit on that scale is unbelievable. It is absolutely unbelievable. Even if you take a fee on that, it is impossible to think in any commercial enterprise where the supposed profit is far in excess of the actual asset that you're constructing. That would be totally confused. Would be set up an arrangement such that a lot more money would be collected than is required, and in the end you have no way of controlling the actual payments, because now I'm being told that the government of St. Lucia has no say in the account. We have no say, but yet still we're reconciling. What are we reconciling? If we have no interest in the account, the money is not ours. What are we reconciling? Because you have to reconcile one source with another, and to the extent that you have no interest in the other, what are you reconciling to?
Because what all we know about what is in the escrow account is what appears in the report that was tabled, and it is somewhere in the region of $52 million US, and so we were simply told that is the amount they deposited in there, and
so that amount was reconciled to what? That was what is there. But is the unit keeping records? And if the unit is keeping records...
But as the minister said, they're receiving monthly statements. But they're receiving monthly statements. But we did not get a breakdown of what is involved. All the report contains is the 52 plus million US in there. Now I want to ask you, just to clear up a bit, because you heard the Prime Minister, and I think both the ministers as well during his statement, talking about the escrow account not being in St. Lucia. How unusual is this for an escrow account, considering that you're dealing with a foreign developer, that for the escrow account not to be here in St. Lucia?
I can't comment on that. I simply don't know all the facts. But I would have thought that the government of St. Lucia would seek to have this escrow account as close to home as possible. So I don't understand why it would be all the way out there. It may be that it is envisaged that funds will be coming in predominantly from third parties out there, and that would be the quickest way to get the money in there. And even more reason for the government to have an interest in the account.
But we did hear that the Prime Minister did indicate that the banks did have concerns, or about the risk involved. So as someone who's been, given your line of work and in dealings with the banks, the due diligence process, the risks that are involved, how much of a concern is it for banks when they're dealing with monies of coming from such transactions where you have to really be able to get that due diligence done? Is it an onerous task for banks, particularly here in St. Lucia and in the region?
Generally, the whole concept of due diligence is not something that's very, very straightforward. It could take you an awful long time to get to understand the background to a cash flow or some such thing. It would take a long time. When you consider, if you look at some of the transactions, for example, I don't know the extent to which you may follow it, but the extent to which some of these Russian oligarchs go to hide the true ownership of assets, it can be very, very tedious and winding, etc. and so on. So it won't take a long time. It would appear to me to be the simpler thing to keep those funds as close to us as possible, right? For example, an investor wants to pay after all approvals have been got, if they have been got, they want to put in the $300,000 US into an account within this project. It will seem to me the simplest thing to do was deposit the thing into a bank in St. Lucia. The bank itself would do all its due diligence, compare the monies being received with what is the statutory requirement, and if, for example, in respect of one, let's take it the simplest way, one person, one passport, and the money being transferred, say, is $300,000. The bank has got to go back to the legislation and look and see, look, this is $300,000. You can tie it in. Yes, we can accept it, and that's it. It's done. I mean, if we scale it up and we have a lot more coming through, then obviously the satisfaction of the clearance for the money will take a little bit longer. But to me, that's the way it would be done. When we go and we have monies being deposited in an account far away from here, in my mind, you tend to lose control. You have to rely on parties, third parties, because even before you have these people doing work for you, you have to do your own due diligence on them. You tend to lose a lot of control that way. I don't know why it went out there in the first instance, but it seems to me that we lost control as soon as we did this. And the idea, what we must remember in the end, it was St. Lucia that initiated the transaction. And ultimately, all monies arising from that transaction should reside in St. Lucia. I can't understand why it's anywhere else.
But one of the things that keep gnawing at the back of my mind is the sort of competitive nature of the CIP or CBI, as they call it in the other islands, because you have our sister islands and they also have their own products. And one of the ways of being able to get as many as you can from the marketplace is for you to be able to have that reduced time, the shortest possible time in being able to do the due diligence, shortest possible time for you to be able to grant the applications, because then all of that factors into how good of a product you have. And so I'm wondering, Frank, that sort of competitive nature, is it really hurting the business in the region as a result of wanting to be able to be the first pick, because you check all those boxes that people are looking for, what they will gravitate towards as being an easier facilitation?
The market, in the sense that we are all five islands, all within the small space here, and we're competing almost for the same market. So, and in the end, if we act individually, we want to attract people to our product as much as possible. And once we're into open competition, this is then we have that race to the bottom. So it would have been it would have made a lot more sense for the islands to operate as the OECS and market the thing out there, because in that case, you're competing with the other jurisdictions not within our space. That would have made more sense. But the way we're doing it here now, therein lies that need to come up with all sorts of interesting ways of doing things which cannot be in our own interest. What I've sensed is that we have lost control over this thing. That's the sense I have from what I'm hearing.
Hopefully with the MOA, and if we have some time, we'll get to that with what we want to have that singular regulator within the OECS space. But we want to, because we were speaking a little earlier on about whether there were increased investors, the revision of what Galaxy is doing. So the minister acknowledged during his statement in Parliament that he did speak out against Galaxy when he was in opposition, and he said he did so at the time because Caribbean Galaxy was selling St. Lucia citizenships, but they had not started construction, nor had they completed their project over in St. Kitts Nevis. But he moved to remedy the situation once he assumed office. So let's hear what the minister had to say with what it is that he did.
In November 2021, I met with Galaxy and informed them that they are required by law to construct the resort. We insisted that the resort must be built. Galaxy agreed that once they finished selling shares for their project in St. Kitts, they would move their operations to St. Lucia to commence the resort. They later indicated that after consultations with AM Resorts, the scope of the project had increased significantly, and additionally, due to the increased construction costs after 2019, they would need to revise the agreed number of shares. The number of shares to Galaxy was increased by the board, and construction on the resort began in early 2023. We have noted delays in construction, and it has not been at the pace and stage that we require.
Not at the pace and stage that is required, because as we know, we showed some footage a little earlier on there. There are perhaps just two structures, very, very unfinished, pertaining to the resort or the residences, and some of the other structures that are seen there on site. It's really the quarters for the workers that would be here on island. Those Chinese, I believe they are of Chinese nationality, and so they are there on property. So what you see there on screen is what there is at the site. And Frank, to your point, when you're talking about them having to put in $100 million up front, at least that was what the initial discussions were. And so that's there, as you see, that is the quarters put up there, erected there. This one is the office building. So the office is there, and then you have a series of blue buildings that is for the workers. So not much activity there on the site. But as the minister indicated, that projects do go through this lull, and coming out of COVID, we saw that delays in projects here on island through supply chain issues and so forth.
But I'm listening to the minister, and I think that it was important that he go a little bit further when we were speaking to the number of shares to be increased, because he did use the word significantly, because therein lies the opportunity to, if you will, renegotiate the whole contract,
well,
and get it more in line with competition.
But the minister did provide some figures, Frank. From 1st August 2021 to 30th August 2024, the unit granted 2,873 approvals. Out of that number, 1,970, that was for real estate for Galaxy. He said St. Lucia never approved 14,000 applications. So once again, the minister did say to us, I want to just repeat the figures, from 1st August 2021 to 30th August 2024, the unit granted 2,873 approvals. Of that number, 1,970 with a real estate for Galaxy. And so those are the figures that he gave us there.
The point I want to make is that there was an initial contract. Certain figures were spoken about. This contract was being amended because of supposed significant increases in costs. And these significant increases in costs did not allow the project to be fit into the package that was there initially. Surely that is the opportunity to renegotiate, if you will, because what attained previously cannot possibly obtain now. He did not say it increased from X to Y. He just said increase. So we still don't know what is the scale. We still don't know what is the scale of the new project, because it is only if you know the scale of the new project you can determine what funds are required. Because remember, initially the developer was supposed to put in $100 million. In this new project, is its input rather being increased, or are we looking to get the increase from a wider pool of people? It seems to me that the entire project should have been looked at again with a view to St. Lucia coming out of it in the best way possible. I am not getting a sense that we coming out in the best way possible. And like I said, I want to repeat, as I said a while ago, we appear to have lost control. Because if we have the kind of money we're talking about in this escrow account, why is it the project is the state we're seeing on the screen? Why is it? And also, why is there the delay in funds? Because let's assume the funds are out there in an account somewhere. I don't know. Why is there the delay in the funds coming into St. Lucia?
The numbers, and I want to be able to bring in the St. Kitts experience, because that is where all of this is stemming from. Caribbean Galaxy operating over there. To this day, the government and people of St. Kitts Nevis, they have not had the jail project, which is the sort of equivalent or similar to the infrastructure option. So they've not had this prison project delivered to them at all by Caribbean Galaxy. The Ramada Hotel, which Galaxy was doing, has finally opened up, but I'm hearing some reports that everything is not fully completed. But the Prime Minister in St. Kitts Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew, during a statement in Parliament, and he delivered that March 26, 2024, he spoke of having a very tough time in getting answers on the number of citizenships allocated to Galaxy over there as well. In the end, it was found that 5,500 applications had been given. So let's take a listen to Prime Minister Terence Drew of St. Kitts Nevis.
Madam Speaker, that is just the main applicants. If you have a family of 4, that is a single share. With a family of 4, that's 4 times 5,500 passports, Madam Speaker. Do a calculation. I'm asking the people of this country. I've been asked for the numbers. And even members from the other side who know very well what the numbers are, they have asked that the numbers be given, but we took a deep dive, and now we are ready to say what happened with that project. So if you were to multiply 5,500 by 4, and the mathematicians are here, I am sure you'll get well over what? 20,000? Yes. 20,000. What is the population of St. Kitts and Nevis, Madam Speaker? About 55,000 on a good day. And just on one project, Madam Speaker, a prison project, the previous administration allowed access to a number of passports, which is about half of the population of St. Kitts and Nevis. And when they were asked to report to the people, they said it's an industry secret, Madam Speaker. An industry industry secret or state secret, kept it away from the people, calling it a state secret, Madam Speaker.
Sounds familiar to you there, Toa? A state secret? Have not been able to find out exactly what it is going on with the transactions, with the agreements?
It comes back to the statement I made a while ago. As soon as we change the scope of the project, in that it costs a lot more than it previously did, the new government, meaning the current government, it was incumbent upon them to renegotiate the contract, whatever it was. Any flaws that existed in the previous contract with Galaxy, the opportunity should have been used to sort it out. So in actual fact, we are now no closer to the truth, if you put that in inverted commas, than we were a few months ago. We simply don't know. That's this unfortunate position that we're in at the moment. We don't know. And all that could have been resolved by simply saying exactly what is the new contract. I mean, you look at the state of this work in progress there. That does not look like an operation with funds at its disposal. And by now, there should be a significant amount of funds at this disposal. Why are we like this? This project is almost reminiscent of the one we had on the East Coast, Le Paradis, when the global economy went bust in 2007, 2008. This is where it's at. And projects like these, when we have massive projects like this, ideally you want to get it out of the way and up and running as soon as possible, because once the economy turns and funds become tight, you don't get anybody going into development projects like that. So we could easily end up in a similar situation. And that's why we need a lot more information than we're getting. I am not sure that anybody can be satisfied with the information that's been given to us or the statement that was made by the minister in the House. I certainly am not. And I have a lot more questions than those I'm asking here.
And certainly part of what has formed the public conversation is about, claims of by MSR Media, Philippe Martinez, about underselling in the marketplace there. Now, the minister in his statement seemed to have acknowledged underselling occurring. So let's take a listen to him and then we'll come on back.
There were claims as far back then that Galaxy was offering financing and discounting sales, the so-called underselling. The honorable member for Miku South stated that these claims were investigated and it was determined that nothing wrong was being done and that there were procedures to ensure that all our requirements were met.
So that's the minister, and he was making reference to him hearing about underselling happening during the time of the United Workers' Party administration. But the minister, though he said that, well, this current administration does not support this underselling, and as a matter of fact, they blacklist anybody who does not follow the guidelines and regulations and so forth. But I want us to take a listen to the CEO of Latitude Group, and Latitude Group, a consulting group in the marketplace, and it does work with the CIU, if not now, but it used to work with the CIU. Not too clear on that, but it does have some working relationship with the CIU here. Now, in an April 2nd, 2024 episode of a podcast called The Global Passport Investor, the CEO, his name is Eric Majors, he said this about why St. Lucia had not initially signed the memorandum of agreement with our sister OECS territories. So let's take a listen to Eric for a moment.
St. Lucia has entered into an agreement with an important developer that is one of the approved projects for their real estate arm, their real estate route. And that developer has, through its own funding, provided financing to investors in the same way that you as a client could go see a bank to borrow in order to purchase a home. They were offering some financing for you to purchase a unit in their development. And that meant that the capital outlay that applicants who chose that program was less than $100,000 or $200,000. But it simply meant that they were borrowing, and how that loan got repaid was through a creative arrangement where in the end you'd hand over the keys back to the developer and no longer own that unit. So the developer lent you some money, and in exchange for settling your debt, you wind up 5 years later giving it back to the developer. Very innovative structure, highly contested by many in the industry, no doubt, but one that the government in St. Lucia allowed for, and that they're currently bound to finalize and finish until that project is fully developed and completed.
Eric Majors there of Latitude Group. So the minister seemed to have described what that underselling is, financing and so forth in the marketplace. And then Eric Majors there giving some sort of insights into why the government did not sign initially onto the MOA with the other OECS territories. Because remember, they were asking for some time, because they had contractual obligations that they needed to meet, and that once they had met those contractual obligations, then they would have signed on to the MOA, and they did sign on sometime, I think it was June 3rd, thereabout. Your thoughts on what you heard there from Eric Majors?
I don't know as to which government entered into that arrangement with Galaxy. But the point is, when market conditions changed and there was a significant increase in the cost of putting up this hotel, there was an opportunity, if you will, to renegotiate. And it is beyond me why someone would negotiate into the kind of arrangement that this gentleman was speaking to a while ago.
But what is wrong with that?
Because if you recall, the arrangement was that Galaxy would put in a certain amount of money. The rest of the money would come by those citizens, those persons who wish to have St. Lucian passports ultimately. And the idea was that it was their money they were putting in. Now we are hearing that Galaxy had taken out a loan somewhere else to be loaned to those persons. So that the whole nature of the thing has changed absolutely and completely. And surely, in a situation, because it gets more complex than it seemed to have been initially, and we should be looking to get out of this if staying into some situation like that. Imagine the $200,000, which is $200,000, which the investor is supposed to be putting in, is now being loaned to them by Galaxy.
And
Galaxy
remember before it was 100,000, It has now been...
No, that's totally different.
Okay, right, 100,000 for donation. I apologize. Yes, because it was 300,000 and the government reduced it to 200,000. Yes. 200,000.
But that 200,000 is being borrowed by Galaxy, so that Galaxy in turn can unlend it to those persons who are going to be investing in St. Lucia. So we now have a more complex arrangement that our people here should have been looking at quite closely, because I can't see how that is to the benefit of St. Lucia ultimately. I cannot. I'll have to wrap my brain about it, but I cannot see how it's been to our benefit. And in the end, we're being told now that the people will barely hand the keys back to Galaxy. What does St. Lucia get out of all of this? Who owns the plant in St. Lucia when it's on the ground? That's the interesting question. Who owns the plant?
Well, then the
This thing has gone.
developer, is it the developer? I don't know. Questions?
Was that the intention of the government of St. Lucia when it started off? This thing has gone beyond our control right now. Absolutely beyond our control. I mean,
Well, remember that the 2023, the April 1st, 2023 to March 30th, 2024 report remains outstanding. And so all of those discussions, details, may very well form that in the next report. So we have to wait to see when the minister will be able to bring it to the House, and maybe with another minister's statement.
therein lies the necessity for timely reporting, because these statements are supposed to be coming in at some time in the future. We don't, after they're late, we don't even know when they will be coming in, right? And at that level, and dealing with that kind of money, the slightest delay can end up costing millions of dollars. And therein lies the problem we are in at the moment.
In the
This is outside our control.
In the 5 or so minutes that we
outside
have
our control.
left, I want to just go quickly to due diligence. And, you know, we opened up talking about that because you had mentioned about staffing and so forth. The annual report, and the minister did make note of it in the House, that there's a 40% increase in staff for due diligence, accounts, and the verification departments. So that is so that to denote that the government is taking the due diligence aspect very, very seriously. Now, under program cost in the annual report for the year, there was an increase for due diligence expense at $14,630,097. Last year, it was at $10.78 million. So a good leap of an increase there to ensure that the due diligence is done and taken very, very seriously.
But the due diligence is paid for by the clients, aren't they? If I recall.
Yes, they have the fee they must pay.
So typically, because if you note, revenue includes the due diligence fees. Yeah?
And the administration fees as well, administrative fees.
Right. But the thing is, the due diligence fees, if I recall, the due diligence fees, the two numbers should be approximately the same. Both the income and the expenditure on due diligence should be the same, but they're not. And if anything, because we have due diligence fees at $20 million, right? And then we have due diligence expenses at about $14.7 million. These two numbers should be the same. So that's another thing.
But I'm not sure. Why would you believe that they must be the same?
They must be, or there's a timing difference, because the customer pays for the due diligence. And hopefully, when the customer pays for the due diligence, you pass it on. Unless you are overbilling the people or you're underbilling, the numbers should be the same. They should be the same.
Well, then the more questions.
I don't know what's the issue there. But the due diligence should not so much be our expense per se. The customer pays for it. We should not be bearing anything. All right?
And so that is some clarification coming from the authorities.
Due diligence is an integral part of anything when you're dealing at that level, given the fines that are levied by the regulators in the US when things go awry. So we really should have due diligence being undertaken at the top level. But don't forget, we are not doing it ourselves. The CIP unit is not doing the due diligence itself. It engages people to do the due diligence. So I don't understand when we hear that you're staffing up because of increased due diligence requirements. It's not undertaken by, we don't have the capacity, the knowledge to do it. The most we can do is put up the systems, but we're relying on third parties to do the due diligence. We're relying on the bank, when funds are transmitted through St. Lucia to do what they have to do to retain the corresponding bank relationships. I don't understand when we talk about beefing up the staff to do what we have to do. And then again, I don't think that is an explanation that one should be offering, because if you're going into business and you undertake an expense that is essential, you don't expect to get taps on your back because you do it. I don't understand. In my opinion, this report that came in last week or whenever has raised a lot more questions than provided answers, and we are all not better off for it. And we have the added problem of this new project. Was it the one in Rockall, the BMAX? That is another issue all by itself. That's another issue by itself.
That is an entirely different issue. The minister did give some sort of insight into what they've been able to uncover pertaining to that. He did say that the gentleman at the center of it all, Majolovic, that the prosecution over in Montenegro, the timeline for charging him expired and no charges have been filed as yet, but the government as well as the CIU waiting for some further legal advice and information from some of the relevant parties over in the international sphere, so that they can see what direction exactly they need to go with that. And so, as you say, the BMAX is a whole completely different conversation. But I'll give you the final word since we're out of time. So if you wanted to give a final word, maybe your thoughts on BMAX, go right ahead.
I just want to stay on the whole concept of the due diligence as far as BMAX is concerned. When we're talking about doing due diligence on a prospective business partner or some such thing, we are not looking for perfection. We're not looking to say for sure that person has got nothing. We're talking about looking for red flags. And to the extent that you have a red flag, you sort of, unless that red flag is a very, very light red flag, you walk away. And I'll give you an example of an experience I had a few years ago. We were discussing with some parties in Dominica. At that time it was a bank, and here I'm going back about 10 years, 12 years, and they required us to do an audit of the bank. It was an offshore bank. We did our due diligence in accordance with my firm's at the time's procedures. But even before we got clearance from our people overseas, we in St. Lucia had rejected the client. And the reason we rejected the client is that they paid us the audit fee for the audit fully before we even went to Dominica. That is a red flag, so red, it's redder than all red flags. And that is the point. When things do not make sense, they don't make commercial sense. When it does not fit, you walk away from it. What's even worse, the two guys who were trying to engage us to do the audit were fairly young. They were not 30 yet, but here they were in control of about $50 billion. And we're talking in 10, 12 years ago. $50 billion. We walked away from that. When finally we got the results from London for the due diligence that was done up there for us, our due diligence rated from 0 up to 5, where 5 was really off the scale. They all graded 5, and we could not take the client on. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for indications that that party you're dealing with could be damaging to your reputation, could be damage to your brand, etc. and so on. In the case of BMAX, I'm very, very concerned as to the direction we're going in.
All right. I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, your professional expertise. Thank you so much. We've been speaking there with Frank Myers of Frank Myers Consulting. And that has been another episode of Special Report. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melissa Joseph. See you next time.